Good morning, afternoon, evening, or 3 a.m. to you, my friends, and welcome to our Excellence in Legal Research course on Advanced Constitutional Research. If you don't already know me, I'm Professor Hinojosa, and I will be your guide through the extremely exciting world of constitutional research for the day. Before we get started, though, I want to set some expectations for what the lecture is going to look like today. So, as I'm sure you can see, this lecture is remarkably short compared to the others. And that's because we don't deal with constitutions all that often. And when we do, we're not sifting through a billion of them like we do with statutes. We're dealing with one, maybe a handful at the absolute most. Well, we won't be here for very long. Let's try to get through it together. So let's talk about constitutions real quick. You know them, you love them, you grew up with them venerated throughout public government buildings and your history-obsessed dad's office. It's one of the first things you learn about how the government is structured. And because of that, there's not really a lot else to say on them. Even when we're talking about constitutional law as a whole subject, we only need the Constitution as our jumping off point before we go into case law. Which, if you want to learn how to do that, might I suggest the very first elective in the ELR series. But today, we're just going to focus on getting some practice in. So we got to figure out where to find these dang things. If you don't have your pocket constitution handy like I do, like the nerd I am, we can find it in a couple different places. We're mostly going to stick to Westlaw and Lexis today, or at least we will in the demo. But never fear, there will be an excellent handout on the Canva page detailing some free US and Texas constitutional resources for you. And these resources are excellent. Some even have annotated constitutions, so you'll be able to find other relevant primary law without a problem. So be sure to download that PDF and save it in your files for later for when you need it. Or print it and stick it on your fridge, whatever works best for you. In the meantime, let's move over to Zoom for a bit so I can show you how to find them on Westlaw and Lexis. Okay, so let's get started with this demo. I'm going to show you all the ways to get to the US Constitution and the Texas Constitution on Westlaw. So firstly, we're going to focus on the US Constitution. There's a bunch of different ways to get there, and that'll all depend on where you are in your research. If you're already kind of deep in it and you have to end up going to look at the Constitution from wherever you are, there's a way to get there pretty easily. Anyways, the easiest way that I know how to do it is to just in the search bar type in US Constitution. You have to spell it right though. I don't know how to spell it. But anyway, it'll pop up right here under content pages, US Constitution. So you click into that, and it's a little bit weird because it'll only show you this one tab right here, but if you open that up, it'll show you all the different articles and amendments of the US Constitution. And I really like it because the further you go into this, the more it will start giving you extra primary law, extra secondary sources, extra explanatory materials, a whole bunch of other stuff, because this is an annotated version of the Constitution of the United States. So not only does it contain the actual letter of the law, but it has a bunch of extra materials to help you understand and go forward. Cool. So that's the easiest way I know how to get there. Another way that we can get there is we can go from this tab, this Get Started tab. You should have something that says Statutes. And I know that sounds weird because we're talking about the Constitution, but trust me. So you go into Statutes and Court Rules, and under Federal, the first thing you'll see is the USCA, which is not what we need. We need the US Constitution, which just so happens to be right under it. So very easily, we could just click into that and get to the same page we were at before. Exact same thing, fairly easy. Just depends on how you want to do your research. Now, the last way that we can do it is from this bottom tab. Don't look at the AI stuff. Don't look at the precision research stuff. We don't care about that. We're going into federal materials. And from here, you might notice that there isn't a direct link to the Constitution, which is a little bit annoying, but we can work around that. Because if we click into the USCA and we let it take us to the USCA, one of the first things that you will see here is the Constitution of the United States located within the USCA. So that's nice. And then again, back at the exact same page. The reason I showed you how to get to it from the USEA, just in case you're already doing statutory research and you get pointed towards constitutional law, you can always get there from the table of contents if you're already in the USEA. So, great. That's how we look at the US Constitution. And now we're going to move on to the Texas Constitution, which is a little bit more involved, but not really by much. So, the first way that we can do it is just like we did earlier, we can go into statutes and then we can filter by state and go to Texas. And then this is where it gets a little bit weird. Go into the index of Texas statutes. From the index, like I said, if you're already in the middle of your searching and you're already in this index, you can always just go to C and type in Constitution and spell it right, and you'll find the Constitution of Texas. And it'll pull it up really easy. Now, this is, a little bit weird looking, but this is an alphabetical list of all of the different provisions in the Constitution of Texas. So we have A through corporations. The next thing is correctional to governors, et cetera, all the way down. Cool. So that's one way to get there. Alternatively, if instead we wanted to start with Texas materials, we would go here to State Materials and click on Texas. And then here we have all of the different Texas stuff. So in case you have a version of Westlaw that only really gives you Texas materials, this would be a great place to start. And I know here, again, you're seeing that there is no Constitution. What we're going to do is we're going to go into Vernon's Texas Rules Annotated. And then from here, go into the index of Texas statutes again, do the exact same thing we did before. Easy peasy, we can get to the Constitution, no problem. But anyway, that's all I really have for Westlaw. It's fairly easy. And if nothing else, just Google it. They're everywhere. The US Constitution and the Texas Constitution are really easy to find on Google. But anyways, let's move on to Lexis. Okay, so Lexis is actually a little bit easier because it doesn't give you as many options, but we still have the easiest ones available to us. So when we want to search for the US Constitution on Lexis, we can start in the search bar and just type in Constitution. We can look through all constitutions, or if we typed in US Constitution, it will automatically take us to the Constitution of the United States, which is great. That's what we need. And then differently than the way that Westlaw had it set up, we can just open all of the different tabs based on these different articles and amendments and go from there. It's just organized a little bit differently, but it's the exact same thing. But anyways, we do that, or if we want to look for the Texas Constitution, we can type it in and it would take us directly to it. Or if we didn't want to use a search bar because let's say we are already in our state materials, which we would get to by going to state and then going to Texas, we could scroll down to the statutes and legislation, and unlike Westlaw, they already have the link here for the Texas Constitution. Easy peasy. Not a lot of choices. But then we can open that up and then we can see all the different articles, etc. Not a lot of different ways to get there on Lexis, but there are there. They are there. They exist in Lexis. And again, if all else fails, Google it. You can find it. But anyways, let's go back to the PowerPoint. So since there's not much else left to do but practice, let's do the in-class exercise together. I'll read it out here and then we'll jump over to Zoom again to see how to find exactly what we need. Okay, your client is Joey Shepard, a Lubbock resident. Since 2019, Shepard has been suspected by police of illegal drug distribution. Although police searched his office with a search warrant in the past, they did not find any evidence of such crime. But police officers did not give up. They felt confident that they could find indications of drug distribution in Shepard's garbage. As a matter of general routine, the trash truck comes to pick up trash from Shepard's community on Thursday mornings. This past Thursday at 4:30 a.m., two police officers drove to Shepard's house and found a black trash bag containing garbage on the curb of the road just outside of Shepard's door. The two officers loaded this garbage bag into their trunk and drove back to the station. When they went through the garbage bag and found Shepard's letters and bills, along with other household trash, inside the bag. They also found a few small plastic bags with residual white powder. The white powder tested positive as an illegal drug. As a result, the police arrested Shepard. Shepard asserts there is a law prohibiting police from collecting evidence by stealing his garbage without a warrant. So now, you have to research the search and seizure procedure in the U.S. Constitution to determine if it applies to Shepard's problem. Use Westlaw for your research. Okay, so now that we have a good understanding of how that went and all the things that we need to actually look at, let's move over to Zoom.
Okay, so we've got 3 questions to answer. The first one we want to look at is we want to use the USCA index to locate the provision of the US Constitution that governs searches and seizures and provide the citation. Now, one way that you could do this is to first type in the US Constitution, like we did before. This is the lazy way, but let's do it this way first. You go here, you open up the table of contents, and you browse for just a moment. Or if you are a dedicated Pocket Constitution user like I am, you already know that it is in Amendment 4. So we open that up, and this is where we would start with Amendment 4, searches and seizures and warrants. Cool. That would be the citation that we would add right here. The way that I wanted you to get here is the long way, but let's do it. So let's go to Federal Materials and let's go to the USCA. And then let's go over here to the index. And we could go to C for Constitution here and then do what we did previously. Or if we, don't necessarily know that yet and we want to maybe look at W for warrants, we could do that. We could go to W and find warrants and open that up. And then from here, we could look for the Constitution of the United States, searches and seizures. It takes us to the Constitution Amendment 4. Gets us there in the exact same way. So that's number 1. Okay, so our second question asks us to use the results from step 1 and use the notes of decisions to find a note on garbage. Under this note, which case of the U.S. Supreme Court set the rule for this topic? So we're here on the Fourth Amendment page, and you might be noticing, my sweet friends, oh my God, there are 0 notes to decisions. What is that about? That's crazy. But it's not. You guys are clever. And I'm sure that you noticed that when we were back on the original page here, you saw more than just the link for the Fourth Amendment. So when you go back and you look and you see that there are notes of decisions that are added as subdivisions of this particular subcategory. So what we would have to do in this case is go through each of these and see if any of them have anything pertaining to what our fact pattern wants us to look for, which is the expectation of privacy with garbage, right? That's what we gleaned from the fact pattern. This person wants privacy with his garbage. So let's start here on this first notes of decisions page and see if we can find something relevant to that. Now we get here and we notice, Holy Mother of God, there are so many notes of decisions. So we click into that and we find that there are going to be categorized over here based on all the different protections given by the Fourth Amendment. So we scroll a little bit, we scroll, and we see here expectation and protection of privacy in places and objects. That's very important. So let's open that up. There is a ton. So since we're already kind of in the right area, what we're going to do is we're going to look for whoops, garbage using Control F. And we found it right here on 562. We could have found it through browsing, but it would have taken us a million years. Control F is your best friend. So we go in here, and all of these notes of decisions that are going to come up immediately are notes of decisions that have to do with an expectation of privacy regarding garbage or trash. So we start reading. And the first thing that we see is this case that lists that residents of house sufficiently expose their garbage to the public to defeat their claim to Fourth Amendment protection because they placed the garbage in opaque bags at the curb for pickup by a trash collector. It says that the residents of the house could have no reasonable expectation or privacy in the inculpatory items that were discovered in those trash bags. And the case that it cites is California versus Greenwood. So you notice that it's got a bunch of different citations at the end there because it worked its way through the courts in order to get to the US Supreme Court. So we could click into it to actually see the whole case if we wanted to, or to get the citation, we would just look at this last one here, the one that is US. We know for a fact that one is the US Supreme Court reporter. We also know the SCT is another Supreme Court reporter, but that would be the citation we would want to use is the one to the highest court and the one to, I guess, the maximum publication. We could just call it for shorthand. So it would be this one right here, 486 US 35. And that's the answer for number 2. And we've got one last question, which is, does a person have a reasonable expectation of privacy with respect to their garbage? And how will the aforecited case apply to our fact pattern? We want to list the head notes specifically that support our answer. I don't want to make you read this whole case, so we're going to just look through the head notes on California versus Greenwood. So cool. We could just scroll through and read. We can see that there's only 8 of them, so we could figure it out pretty quickly. But we know that what we're looking for is the reasonable expectation of privacy regarding garbage. So I'm going to Control F and look for garbage. And of course, that word is going to come up a lot, but we look for where it comes up in the head notes. We see the very first head note has this little key number regarding garbage, trash, and specifically discarded items. We see that it says the Fourth Amendment does not prohibit the warrantless search or seizure of garbage left for collection outside the curtilage of a home. Don't you love this word, curtilage? What a weird word. I would end up, going forward and looking up what curtilage actually means. That's how you further your research. But I digress. We keep reading and we see that number 2 also says something. Warrantless search and seizure of garbage bags left at the curb outside of the house would violate Fourth Amendment only if there were manifestation of a subjective expectation of privacy in the garbage, which society would accept as objectively reasonable. That's incredibly subjective, but still, that gives you another jumping off point for further research here. We keep reading and we see in another key number that has the same heading, residents of the house sufficiently expose their garbage to the public to defeat their claim of Fourth Amendment protection, yada, yada, yada. That language sounds familiar. It's because that is the exact language that got us to click on this case in the first place. So far, 1, 2, and 4 look promising. Number 5, not so much. This is about criminal law and this is about judicial notice, but we're not really caring about that right now. Last one I want you to look at is head note number 6 under the same key number discussion, garbage, trash, and other discarded items. Fact that state Supreme Court had announced a right to privacy in garbage left outside the home for collection did not make the expectation of privacy in the garbage reasonable so as to entitle it to Fourth Amendment protection. Anyways, from here, like I said, these weird words, weird subjectivities would give you more jumping off points to complete this research if you were doing this for real on a real fact pattern. Or you could click on the head note number to actually take you down to that part of the discussion in the case itself. Click on it again to get back up to the head notes to start on the next one, etc., etc. That is the in-class exercise. I told you it was going to be really, really brief, and here we are, like 8 minutes later. We did it, guys. Constitutional research is fairly easy when we're working with really broad concepts like warrantless search and seizure, but as you've heard me state, it gets more and more nuanced the further you look. But then we're getting into stuff like statutory interpretation and case law, and that is for a different ELR session. So let's finish this up and be done for the day.
Well, that's all I got for this session. So, onwards, sweet friends, and thanks for hanging out with me at this ELR lecture. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or maybe you just have a picture of a cool rock that you want to show me for absolutely no extra credit, you can absolutely do that by emailing me here or asking for me at the library. Good luck with your assignment, and I hope y'all have a great semester. Bye-bye!